So I wanted to first acknowledge all the TTC students and wish you luck tomorrow. I know it's a big day. Huh? ATC as well. I know that two of my daughters, as you may know, took the TTC class, and I remember when we first came here, I think we may have come a couple of times before we introduced the idea of one of my daughters to come down here, and I told my daughter, I said, you know, there's a program in the Bahamas, which, you know, oh, Bahamas. And I showed her a picture of the brochure, and like, oh, that's nice. And I said, you could become a yoga teacher in like a month. You could have a month on the beach being a yoga teacher. And she's like, oh, wow. And I said, there's just one small catch. And based on Swami Brahmananda's advice, he said that it's spiritual boot camp. And I said, it's sort of like spiritual boot camp. But you're on the beach in the Bahamas. You're going to become a yoga teacher. How bad could it be? And I told her, I said, I guarantee you two things. I guarantee you it'll be the hardest thing you've ever done. And I guarantee you that when you finish it, it'll be the best thing you've ever done in your life. And a few days later, I forget if she called me or texted me, and she said, Dad, and she said, I want to do that thing. I said, what thing? The thing in the Bahamas. I want to do that thing. I'm ready. I can take it. And I said, really? I said, and she said, yes. And even to this day, Ginger and I were talking about that today. Even to this day, she monitors her health by her yoga program, you know, and from what she learned here. So it's, I think you all know that it was probably true. One of the hardest things you've ever done, right? Very hard, very difficult. But I think when you leave here, you've accomplished something that very few have. And I really honor and respect what you guys have done and gone through. And good luck to your future as yoga teachers and senior teachers. So it's a pretty cool thing. Anyway, tonight, I want to talk to you about digestion. And I want to go into detail if I could, because how many of you have digestive problems? Like, it's a really common thing, right? And I think that we have to fix that because doesn't have to be a really common thing. And I don't think that it's that difficult to fix. So if you don't mind, tonight, I'd like to run a fine-tooth comb through the entire digestive system in a really easy to understand way. So you can begin to sort of understand and troubleshoot what might be going on with your digestion, and I'll give you some tips on how to fix it. Does that sound good? A good plan? So first of all, we have to model Mother Nature. We know that nature is doing this really for us. If we would just listen carefully to what Mother Nature would provide for us seasonally, we would be in great shape, right? We know that, I was reading a book called The Forest Unseen, a year or so ago, a couple of years ago maybe. And in that book, it's about the man, this botanist, took a square meter of earth and he watched his meter of earth every single day. Anything that happened to his little meter of earth, any bug crawled on it, any bird flew on it, anything pooped on it, anything that happened to his little square meter, he wrote about it for an entire year. One day, a deer walked across his little meter of earth. And he started talking about how deer have microbes that can digest bark in the winter. And they have microbes that can digest leaves in the summer. And then the microbes are dramatically changing inside of us and inside of deer every season for very specific reasons. And in the summertime, if a deer were to actually eat bark, they wouldn't have the microbes to eat bark in the summer, and it could cause such a level of indigestion it could literally kill the deer. I was blown away by that. I was like, wait a minute. Deer die when they eat out of season? And most humans don't even know what is in or out of season? And we get away with it, or do we? When I ask how many of you have digestive problems, and most of us raise our hand, I wonder if we're actually getting away with it. Does that make sense? That maybe if we actually ate with the seasons, something dramatic would happen. We know that there's microbes in your gut that change from the soil microbes are dramatically changing in the winter, and they support structural strength. they actually heat the body up, and they support better digestion. So you can eat the foods in the winter, which are soups and nuts and seeds and heavier kinds of foods in the winter. More strong digestion. Eat bark, if you will. In the spring, the microbes change, and they allow us to decongest and move kapha out of the system. In the summer, the microbes change to dissipate heat out of the body, dramatically shifting from one season to the next season to the next season. And I thought that was just mind-boggling and fascinating, and how we are so disconnected to these absolute effortless and natural cycles. So what I decided to do was, I wrote a book called The 3-Season Diet. Many of you may have known that. And it was all about eating with the seasons. I wrote that back in 2000. But I was just blown away by this new understanding of the microbes that are changing and how we are disconnected from that completely. So I created a thing called the 3-Season Diet Challenge. And it's something where every month we put out a packet of information. It's completely free to anyone. And you get a monthly packet in May, June, July, and August. And you get all the recipes for that season. Emma Frisch, who's one of the leading stars on the Food Network, did all of our recipes from the Ayurvedic. I gave her all the Ayurvedic foods, and she did the recipes. We have all the research on the microbiome, changing from season to season, all the foods you should eat, grocery list, and it's completely free. My goal was to give everyone a monthly packet that you could get and begin to start eating with the seasons and see if that alone would change your digestion, change our world. I believe that we now know, after our talk yesterday, that the microbes are holding our emotion, and they change seasonally. And what would happen if we actually got the microbes at the right time of the year to support the right digestion, support getting us cool in the summer and decongest in the spring, heat us up and warm us up and insulate us and help us digest hard-to-digest foods in the wintertime? This is something that nature provided for us, but we've lost that connection. So that's something that I highly encourage you. There's zero obligation. It's something I'm doing more as a research project. These little brochures up here are all about that, so you can kind of get this monthly package. Super cool. This month we did all the edible flowers in May. In June, you get all the edible flowers in June, July, August, September. All the flowers that are actually harvested in each month. What they do, their properties, how neat is that, right? Did you know that you can eat flowers? I know you know you can eat a few of them, but there's tons of them that have incredible medicinal properties that were much a part of our history, very much a part of European history and Austria. Big deal eating flowers, but we have no really relationship or connection to that. So it's a really fun project, and I'm super excited about that, making that completely available to everybody, completely for free with zero obligation, just to help get us connected, and see if you begin to crave what's in season. In the wintertime, what's happening in the winter, it's cold and dry, and nature's harvesting soups and nuts and seeds and heavier unctuous foods to insulate and protect the intestinal mucosa, right? Isn't it true? A higher fat kind of diet. So in the wintertime, it's very important that we eat, drink unctuous foods to create a protective coating over our intestinal tract. We know that the intestinal tract is inundated by stress. If we look at the intestinal tract, you'll see that 95% of the serotonin is actually manufactured and produced in your intestinal tract. So you have all of your neurotransmitters and all of your stress-fighting hormones are actually produced inside your intestinal tract. And when you're under a lot of stress, the intestinal mucosa will dry out. And in winter is a very dry season, so nature said, don't worry about that, we have it covered. We're going to give you warm soups and stews and heavier unctuous foods like slippery elm and marshmallow root and licorice root and barks and heavy things you can cook into slimy, unctuous teas, heavier proteins and heavier fats to protect and insulate the intestinal tract. Come spring, after creating this protective lining throughout the entire intestinal tract, nature, the deer, they dig up the roots. And the roots are where the vast majority of the microbes live. So we have microbes on the plant, but there's a super high concentration of microbes in the roots. So the deer in the very spring, they dig up the roots and they eat these roots, which were very much a part of the diet in human diets around the world. People would dig up burdock root and dandelion root and chicory Oregon grapes and grape and many other types of roots that they make teas out of. These were loaded with bitter constituents and loaded with microbes. So this is the first way that nature said, we're going to, in the springtime, we're going to repopulate your gut with brand new 2015 microbes. And we're going to do that by eating the things that have the most microbial concentrate. Now, if you do it with an herb, you can get a lot of these roots in herbal form. You want to make sure that you're getting them in the whole herb form. If you get them in an extracted herb form, those extracts were made with alcohol, and what does alcohol do to the microbes? Kills them. So you want to make sure you're getting the herbs in the most natural state as possible. Either make them into a tea or just the root, dried up, ground up, where you have 1,000 times more microbes in a whole herb than you have in an extracted herb. Okay? So that's important because we're really about not just the biochemical property of the herb, but you're really about the microbial property, which is something we're just beginning to understand. So then, and what those bitter roots do as well is they also, the villi in the intestinal tract, when they get really stressed out, you can get dried out intestinal tract, right? You can get constipated. Many of us don't go to the bathroom unless we do something, eat lots of fiber, take a pill, run for a mile, stand on our head, drink tons of water. Many of us have very interesting rituals around having a bowel movement first thing in the morning, right? And this is because the intestinal tract, when it's because it is it is where the body directs all the stress, and that goes right to your intestinal tract, dries out your mucous membranes. When they get dry, you get constipated. Intestinal wall, they're made of mucous membranes, so their job in life is to basically make mucus, right? So if you dry it out enough, it'll start to make mucus. And sometimes it can make so much mucus, you can actually see the mucus in your stool. This is not good. This is what I call a deal breaker. You don't pass go, you don't get $200 until you never see mucus again. Because that means that the villi are flattened out inside your intestinal tract, and this becomes a problem. Well, nature said, don't worry about it. We have it all covered because we're going to give you these bitter roots to pull the mucus off the intestinal tract and feed you with really good microbes in the spring. So we have you covered. Don't worry about it. We're going to be good. As long as you lubricated and unctuated and nourished your intestinal tract in the winter with high proteins and high fat unctuous foods, which just happen to be naturally harvested to antidote the extreme of the winter season, which is to be very, very dry. You all with me still? So then nature says, okay, well, after we've harvested these roots and dandelion roots and we've cleaned the intestinal tract out, the next thing that comes out of the ground are the green sprouts. The greens, the fields in the springtime become this sort of fluorescent green. And these sprouts have sometimes 400 times the nutritional value of the full-grown plant. Sometimes less, but always 20, 30, 50, 60 times more than the full-grown plant, most studies show. So nature said, I sort of get it. You guys ate a pretty good early winter diet, but come late winter, early spring, if you're eating off the land, there isn't a whole lot of food available. Good chance you're probably starving, right? So we're going to give you what we're going to actually provide for you after we clean out your intestinal tract are these foods that are 2 to 3 to 400 times the nutritional value just to help you get the nutrition that you need. Now we know that Americans eat 100% more food than we need. We have 100% of the food that we actually do need, and most Americans eat an extra 100%. And that extra 100% is where most of the problems lie. They know, then studies show, if people would just eat 30% less than the 100% of the extra that they're eating, all kinds of amazing things happen. Their blood pressure goes down, their cardiovascular risk goes down, they lose weight, their blood sugar drops significantly, their fats in their body drop significantly. All kinds of really cool things happen. We also know in the springtime, if you're living according to nature, you'll notice that your diet, your appetite will naturally start to become less. Spring is a low-fat time of the year. You're coming off winter, which is a high-fat, high-protein. You've stored a lot of extra. You might have gained a few pounds. Spring says now it's time to burn that fat. We're giving you a low-fat diet. Sprouts, berries, cherries, leafy greens. There's no fat in those foods. The nature hasn't had time to build really, heavy, more dense foods. It's light foods. And those foods force the body to clean. They're alkaline. They cleanse. They help the body burn your own fat, which helps you lose some weight, but it definitely will get you into a fat metabolic state. When you burn fat, you don't have hunger. You have much less appetite. So what should happen to us naturally is that in the springtime, we start to feel like we don't have as much of an appetite. I had a patient of mine came to me in March, it was like March or something, and she said, I feel fantastic. I've lost a bunch of weight. My mood is significantly better, but I have one problem left. And I said, what is that? And she says, I have zero appetite. She said, all I want to eat is salad. And I asked her, are you sure everything is good? Everything was good? She said, yes, everything is great. And I said, well, it's March, and you're craving salad, and that's probably exactly what you should be experiencing is a craving for less food, because that's what should happen naturally. Most religions do their fastings in the springtime. We know because there is very little food in the spring. It's a light fare. It's a low-fat harvest. We know that the cells live longer when you don't feed them. Studies show. We know that the mitochondria literally make more energy when we don't feed them. Our bodies are genetically wired to thrive when we starve. We have millions of years of genetics that said that we're mostly spent trying to get enough food to feed ourselves. That's how we spent the last 2 or 3 million years trying to get fed. It's only very recently, in the last, 50 years maybe, that we've actually accomplished that goal, where we have enough food that we don't feel like we're starving. But our genetics have no skills in being able to handle all this excess food. We literally eat 100% more. And the reason why we eat 100% more is because we don't digest what we eat efficiently. When you stress out your system and the gut gets irritated, the intestinal wall is going to produce reactive mucus. So what happens is you see that mucus begin to congest, and then you get constipation or diarrhea or mucus in your stool, and then you see problems with what I like to call the most important half inch of your body, which is where the villi meet the lymphatic system on the outside of your intestinal tract. I wrote an article once called The Most Important Half Inch in Your Body, and literally you have miles of this, but it's where the villi of your intestinal tract meet the gut-associated lymph on the outside of the gut wall. In Ayurveda, we call it the rasa dhatu. That's where the rasa, the lymph, begins to starts. And that lymph, not to get into much detail, Ayurvedically becomes the lymph, becomes the blood, and then the muscle, and the fat, and the bone, the nerve, and reproductive tissue, and finally becomes your ojas 30 days later. If you live a very sattvic lifestyle in that process we talked about last night, really good things happen in terms of this very refined, subtle aspect of digestion, which builds and supports immunity and vitality and radiance and joy and happiness and consciousness. And maybe those are supported by microbes that are clearly different in your body when you live a sattvic lifestyle. However, most people are being stressed 24/7. Their gut is irritated or too dry, and you don't go to the bathroom without effort, or you produce a bunch of reactive mucus and you have excess mucus in your stool or a looser stool, or the mucous membranes are so much mucus that you go to the bathroom regularly, but you're not absorbing and assimilating nutrition because you have so much reactive mucus. The intestinal wall will produce mucus just to get you to poop good. I had a guy whose belly was out to here one time, and I said, how's your digestion? And he said, it's fine. I looked at him and I said, but you have so much extra here. And it was tight as a drum. And I said, really, it's fine? And he said, you can set your clock by it. And I said, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to set my clock by your bowel movements. Not happening. But I can tell you that that is not fine. That extra. That is irritation, and it's not that you're fat. Clearly, I said you're not overweight. This is not that. Your intestinal tract is irritated. You're producing reactive mucus inside your intestinal tract, and the lymph on the outside of your gut wall is swollen. And that's what that extra bloat is about. It's not that you're overweight. It's an irritation in the most important half-inch in your body, and we got to fix that. Well, nature said I got a plan for that too. That's why I harvest. Traditionally, berries were harvested in the spring and in the fall, just like dandelions get on your lawn in the spring and the fall. Cherries are at the end of spring and the beginning of summer. And all these things that dye your clothes red or stain your fingers when you eat them are natural antioxidants and natural lymphatic movers. So nature said, I'm going to give you the slimy stuff in the winter to lubricate and heal your intestinal mucosa. I'm going to give you roots to clean the mucous membranes and fertilize with good bugs. I'm going to give you the roots for cleaning and fertilizing, more greens to give you nutrition, and the greens are loaded with chlorophyll, which fertilize the intestinal villi to make and propagate and proliferate good new this year's model bugs, microbes, diversity, and then we're going to give you all these berries and cherries that are powerful antioxidants to get your lymphatic system to begin to move. Isn't that cool? How nature did that? Every summer, every spring, every summer, that's what's supposed to happen. Except we don't always really do it that well, right? But that's what nature had in store. Every year you get a brand new stable of microbes to actually do very specific things to keep us healthy and keep our immune system strong and support mood and energy and all the things we talked about. I think it's just absolutely fascinating. However, because we're stressed out, the bugs get irritated, the intestinal tract gets dry, produce extra mucus, your lymphatic system gets congested. That lymph around your gut, called the gut-associated lymph tissue, is connected to other parts of the lymphatic system. One is called the skin-associated lymphatic tissue. They're called SALT, salt, GALT, galt. The respiratory lymph is the RALT, or larynx ALT, larynx-associated lymph. Are you with me? There's all these lymph tissues. And when they get congested, your skin can break out with eczema, it can become dry, you can get hives. Your lymphatic system is the system that carries your immune system. In Ayurveda, it's the number one system we treat. It's the drains in the body. The lymph system is your drains. It controls your immune system. Lymph system is what drains all the cellular waste through little tiny lymph nodes where they get attacked by white blood cells and purified. When you eat some fatty toxic thing in your body, you eat some fatty toxin, that gets broken down and pumped into your lymphatic system. Good fats and bad fats go into your lymphatic system. Okay? Underneath my skin, I have a little army of lymphatic vessels that are like my protective immune system. If I get bit by a mosquito, my skin-associated lymph is there to protect me. On the outside of my gut wall, I have lymph to protect me from any kind of weird thing that might get through, including gluten and casein from dairy and these terrible things that are now on the not eat list. You guys with me still? Is this a lot? Are you with me? I've written tons about this. You can watch videos about this again and again and again, but I think it's so critically important for everybody to get how simple this digestion thing is and how nature really took care of it. I hope that is interesting to you. So what happens is the intestinal tract, then when it congests the lymphatic system, yucky things happen. You get swollen, rings on your fingers get swollen, you break out, your joints begin to ache, you get extra weight around your belly. When you menstruate, that lymph drains into the lymph drainage, your reproductive system drains into the lymph, and your breasts can swell and become tender around or prior to the menstrual cycle. You get allergies, sinus, headaches, tiredness, fatigue, lethargy, swollen ankles, wake up in the morning, feel stiff and achy when it needs a little time to get going, pain that moves around your body from one joint to the next joint to the next joint. These are all classic lymphatic conditions. Anybody have any of those? So most of us, the first thing that goes wrong with us is our drains become clogged. Now, when you go to the doctor, they look at your cholesterol levels and they say, oh, Mrs. Jones, your cholesterol level is high. We're going to lower that for you. Well, or your blood pressure is high and we're going to lower it for you. But nobody asks, why did the blood pressure get high? If the drains are clogged in your house, you have to fix the drains first. True? the drains are clogged in your body, you might see back pressure and blood pressure issues. If you have drains clogged, which actually take the fats out of your body, that's what the lymph system does, you might see a disturbance in your cholesterol, higher fats that could cause real problems. I talked about this yesterday, was it? But we talked about like in 1961 when they put cholesterol on the nutrient concern list, and they told America that cholesterol was bad. And ever since then, we've had foods with zero cholesterol. School lunches were with zero cholesterol. In 1980, they started subsidizing the growth of wheat and corn to feed the poor and to eradicate poverty. That was a good idea, except it was nothing but sugar. And they took away the fat. Humans have two sources of fuel, sugar and fat. We took away the fat and gave us sugar, but now we have prediabetes epidemic in the country. It's literally what happened. It wasn't a conspiracy, it's just how it went down. They took cholesterol out of our diet based on a study done in 1913 where they found that when they gave fat, animal fat, cholesterol to rabbits, they got heart disease and died. In the same exact study, they found that they gave the same diet to rats. Did I say rats a minute ago or rabbits? Rabbits. They gave it to rats, and the rats didn't get heart disease at all. We all know that rabbits are vegetarians, right? So if you give rabbits who are vegetarian a high cholesterol animal fat diet, they're probably not going to feel wonderful. They gave the rats the high cholesterol diet, and they did fine. Literally, shockingly, the reason why cholesterol was put on the hit list, on the nutrient concern list in 1961 by the American Heart Association was because of that study done in 1913. Because it gave rabbits heart disease. And we've had 60 years of no fat in our diet, and just recently, last month, the FDA finally took cholesterol off the nutrient concern list. Finally, for all those years. We have taken fat out of our diet. When this lymphatic system gets congested, guess where all the toxins go? Back to your liver and back to your gallbladder. Like your liver and the gallbladder needs it like a hole in the head. Your liver and gallbladder basically have been taking toxins out of the blood and trying to dump them into the intestinal tract to be eliminated as waste. But there's a little problem with that, is that to get it to go to the toilet, we need this thing called fiber. And when you look at ancient humans versus modern humans, you have two incredibly important things. One, hunter-gatherers had 100 grams of fiber per day in their diet. The average American gets 15, maybe 20 if you're super healthy. Very minimum. Our ancestors, millions of years of genetics, 5 times more fiber than we had. Fiber attaches to the bile and takes it to the toilet. Your bile in your liver is like a Pac-Man, gobbling up toxins, gobbling up bad fats, okay? That's its job. And it's gobbling up all this yucky stuff. Then when you eat something fatty, all the bile goes into the intestinal tract to gobble up the fat in your intestinal tract. Gobble up fat-soluble toxins, mercury, pesticides, preservatives, parasites. That's what it's gobbling up in your intestinal tract. But you need fiber to get it to the toilet. If you don't have enough fiber, and the average American, this is the average American now, 94% of that bile goes back to your liver. And your liver goes, what? I mean, wait, I just dumped all that toxic yuck into the intestinal tract to hook up with some fiber to go to the toilet. And literally, this is a textbook fact, 94% of that bile goes back to the liver. The second thing that jumps off the page when you compare ancient versus modern humans is not the amount of carbohydrates and proteins they eat. That's actually about the same. What we argue over constantly, how much protein you should have, how much carbs you should have, it's about the same what they had as what we had. The two things that jump off the page are fat and fiber. When hunter-gatherers, I know we're in a vegetarian community, but our ancestors, as we all know, did eat meat. We got here based on that. When they ate a woolly mammoth, they would eat everything in the woolly mammoth. The fat, the brains, the eyeballs, all that they would eat first because it would go bad fast. They could dry the meat and eat that later, but they ate a lot of fat. And it was feast or famine fat. They didn't eat fat every day. Matter of fact, our ancient ancestors mostly ate what the women were able to dig up or pick or gather while the men were out there pretending like they were hunting. They weren't particularly good hunters. Most of the time, they came back from their macho hunting parties empty-handed. And the women would say, don't worry about it, I got it covered, I've been digging up all day, I got lentil. Just act like you did something important today and sit down and go wash up and we'll be fine. And that's how it went, literally, for millions of years. If it wasn't for the women making sure that they gathered starches and grains and dug up roots, we wouldn't be here as a species. Absolute fact. We were lousy hunters. But when they did hunt something down, they ate every bit of it. Do you all agree with that? So we had the ability to eat a ridiculous amount of fat. When you're eating the brains of woolly mammoth, you can imagine, I couldn't imagine doing that, but that's unfortunately, as unsophisticated as that might sound, that is our genetics. Your gallbladder has a sac of bile in it that's 15 times concentrated regular bile. Did you know that? Your gallbladder, which is a sac that holds the bile, which is the Pac-Man for all the fatty, yucky stuff, and the good fats and the bad fats, has 15 times concentrated bile. What in the world is that gallbladder doing with a sac of bile that's 15 times concentrated? Think about that. People get their gallbladders taken out routinely. They don't change their diet one iota. It's a regular routine surgery. Nobody changes their diet. Very few people have problems after a gallbladder surgery. It's clear, absolutely clear, that our genetics were that we had a significant amount of fat in our diet because that was our main source of fuel. The sweetest thing on the planet was only as sweet as a carrot. There was no dark chocolate to be had. There was no sweets or cake or any of that. It was carrots was the big treat. So we lived, surprisingly, a diet of fat. It's only been the last 15 years we've had so much sugar and we've been addicted to that. And they did that, and that's partly because they took the fat out of our diet, they gave us sugar, and now we're reaping or in the wake of a diet that has been really distorted significantly against our own genetics. So because we don't have very much fat in our diet, our gallbladder becomes atrophied, congested, thick, and viscous, can't flow good. And in fact, we have so little bile in our system compared to our ancient humans that we actually literally reuse the bile 17 times before the bile is escorted out of the body. So our intestinal tract, our liver, will reuse the same bile back to the liver, into the gut, gobble, 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 back to the liver, dumping all the toxins back into your blood, into your heart, back into your intestinal tract, back into your liver, dump all the yuck back into your liver and your heart. This stuff doesn't go to the toilet. It gets reused 17 times back to your liver before it's finally discarded. Can you believe that? And that's an absolute scientific fact because of the diet that we eat today. Now, we know also that that's not how it's supposed to be. That reusing of bile 17 times was during the times of famine, when we weren't able to eat because there was nothing to be had for days or weeks or in the springtime for a very long period of time. We had the ability to use the bile again and again to burn our own fat to force the body to survive. But as a result of having very little fat in our diet, our gallbladder becomes atrophied. When the gallbladder becomes atrophied, it can't gobble up the yuck. We become toxic. The bile also, not only does it help us become better fat burners, the bile buffers the acid from your stomach. It's a buffer for the acid. So let's just say some of you guys are a little constipated. Let's just say some of that bile has reabsorbed toxins back to your liver over many years. Let's just say that your liver is a little bit on the congested side. You know that because if you eat a lot of greasy fried food, you get a stomach ache, nausea, sick, you don't feel good, you don't do well there. How many of you eat a lot of really greasy food? Not that it's good for you, but if you did eat it, you'd feel yucky. If you feel yucky when you eat that food, I'm not saying it's good for you, but it does challenge your gallbladder to let us know how good or strong or robust that bile flow is. How good is your ability to metabolize fat? Have we succumbed to this weakness of our bile flow, our digestive ability, because of what they did to our diet 61 years ago, taking cholesterol out of the diet? The stomach then eats a whole bunch of fatty food, and it says, okay, I've got 4 pounds of fat up here, and I got to send a message to the liver to make enough bile to metabolize all this fat. And the liver is like, what? I'm so congested that I can't do it. So what happens is your stomach says, I'm just going to hold on to all this food until the bile gets their act together and the liver gets their act together, produces enough bile to metabolize all this fat. So the food sits in your stomach and lingers, gives you indigestion, burping, gas, bloating, big belly, particularly up right underneath the rib cage. You'll see that right up here. The stomach also has a lot of acid in it, right? It produces a bunch of acid. And the acid has to be buffered by that bile as well. So if you have a bunch of stomach acid and there's no bile available to buffer that acid, what's your stomach going to do? If the stomach dumps the acid into the small intestine, it could burn a hole through your gut and kill you. So the stomach says, that's not my first choice. I would much prefer to just hold on to the acid for as long as I possibly can, waiting and hoping that the liver gets their act together and they produce enough bile to make this whole thing happen. So the stomach holds on to the acid and gives you what? Heartburn. That's what causes heartburn. And over time, you get heartburn and reflux, and actually the stomach can even push up against the diaphragm. It can affect how you breathe. We know in yoga that the lower lobes of your lungs are full of parasympathetic dominant receptors, calm, repair, rejuvenative receptors. If the stomach has gotten pushed up against the diaphragm, you lose diaphragmatic contractibility. It becomes rigid. You can't breathe deeply into the lower lobes of your lungs. One reason why yoga is so critically important, and maybe not for you guys because you're all pretty limber, but when you start going into the world and you see folks who have this, you're going to realize, you're going to know that their extra weight they have under here is probably pushing up on the diaphragm, causing them not to breathe deep. And the lower lobes of your lungs are where the calming nerves are, so they are only breathing into the upper chest, triggering upper chest stress responsive neurons, telling their body with every breath they breathe, 26,000 of them per day, that life is an upper chest fight or flight emergency response. And that's how most people breathe, little shallow breaths. And that's why yoga is so critically important to create elasticity in the rib cage and free the diaphragm from the stomach. The sun salutation Surya Namaskar is probably the number one absolute best exercise for one thing. I mean, it does so many things. But if you watch that exercise clearly, it's focused on right here, where the rib cage and diaphragm meet your stomach. Every time you go up and you breathe in, the diaphragm is pulling down and you're leaning, going into extension. You're separating this. Then when you bend forward and you flex forward, you're squeezing those muscles together, letting the blood circulate those stressed muscles. Then you stretch it again in the same way. And it's like an accordion for the lower part of your rib cage, the diaphragm and your stomach, forcing blood to function. That's the whole exercise, one after another. Maybe the most important exercise we could ever do for ourselves, in my opinion, from what I see clinically. I prescribe that exercise all the time because I see this all the time. And what happens over time is that the body says, you know what, I have all this acid in my stomach, I've got all this bile in my stomach, all this fat in my stomach because I'm waiting for the bile to get their act together, and that ain't happening. And the bile, guess what the bile does as well? It's what actually regulates your bowel movements. It literally makes you poop. No bile, no poop, period. So if you're having constipation issues and those toxins are going back to your liver, making your liver congested, your bile flow will be compromised. You won't metabolize your fats. You won't move your bowels regularly. You won't detoxify yourself well. You won't get good fats into your system, make you calm and stable, and you won't buffer the acids from your stomach. And the stomach says, I'll hold on to it for as long as I can, but I'm making some heartburn, an ulcer. This could be a problem. So the stomach says, what do you think the stomach does? We're going to make an executive decision here, and we're going to turn the stomach fire off, down a lot. You with me? Now, for you to digest gluten and dairy, which are like the four-letter words in America these days, right? Everybody doesn't eat gluten and dairy. Gluten is a hard-to-digest protein, which requires a very strong amount of acid. Dairy has casein in it, which requires a very strong amount of acid to digest. And if your stomach has any of these issues, which most folks do, then the stomach will turn down the digestive fire and you will not be able to break down the gluten or the casein. It'll go undigested into your gut. We know for a fact it's an intestinal irritant. It'll rip your guts to shreds, cause inflammation on the intestinal wall, lymphatic congestion on the outside of your intestinal wall, and bloat you and create a lymphatic congestive issue which clogs your drains, your immunity, and the ability for you to actually make ojas. This is not to mention the microbial impact of what you think and feel and how you eat. That impact is extremely powerful. We know that there are literally microbes that are responsible for digesting gluten. But most of us don't have it. We know that the digestive fire must be extremely strong to digest gluten. But a lot of us have lost our digestive strength. So what we do, right, is we just stop eating it. And we stop eating all the foods that we don't feel good when we eat. And I think it's a good thing to do that, obviously. But if you stop eating wheat and dairy and corn and soy and all these foods, have we really solved the problem? We can read books about why gluten is so terrible, and I agree with some of it. But I think that if you have a really good, strong digestion, you should be able to digest hard-to-digest foods. Do you all agree? Maybe not everybody agrees. But the reality is, as I watch people be able to eat gluten again regularly, now a lot of folks who have been, this is people who ate gluten in their youth as young adults, but now in their 40s and 50s they can't do it anymore. Those folks are not celiac. They're not gluten intolerant. They've lost their digestive strength. And you can stop eating it and it's fine. You're not going to, there's nothing about gluten or dairy which are a requirement for good health at all. You can stop eating them, doesn't matter. However, that is a sign that your digestive strength, your digestive fire has gone down some, which means your ability to digest hard-to-digest foods has probably gone down, which means the ability for you to detoxify well has gone down. And there's mercury from the coal mine plumes that come from the coal mines all over the earth that are on every organic vegetable that you cannot wash off. So if you can't eat wheat and dairy and you once did, and you just take it out of your diet and think that it's all good, and gluten is just a terrible four-letter word food, we shouldn't eat it, then you might want to think a little bit deeper than that, because that means that your digestive strength has gotten weaker. You don't digest hard-to-digest stuff, and you can take the hard-to-digest stuff out of your diet to some extent, but you can't avoid the toxic environment we live in, and that requires a very strong digestive strength. And your digestive ability is your ability to detoxify. And we now have studies that show that mercury, which is a fat-soluble chemical, finds its way not only into the fat cells, but into your brain. This is a very common thing that we see happening now in people because of a sort of global weakness in our digestive strength. And I think we can do a whole lot better, and by strengthening our digestion. So that's sort of the story. There's one other little minor thing, which is your pancreas, which is over on the right side, or left side rather. You have your gallbladder on one side and your pancreas on the other. Pancreas, what its job is to make insulin for sugar, but it also its job is to make enzymes to help you digest stuff. And the pancreas also buffers the acid. That clear? One little tiny piece left. And those tubes from your gallbladder and your pancreas, they come together and then they go into your intestinal tract together. They hook up. And if your bile is thick and viscous, which most folks have because we haven't been eating fat in 61 years, it congests the pancreatic ducts as well. So your digestive enzymes can't get where they need to go. So you go to the doctor and they say, you should be on digestive enzymes, and you feel better. If you've taken digestive enzymes and feel better, that doesn't mean you don't make them. It means that your pancreas isn't able to deliver them because the duct is clogged. So let's unclog the ducts, right? Is that a good idea? So how do we do some of this stuff? Well, the best declogger for your pancreatic duct and your bile duct is beets. Regular old red beets. They will increase bile flow significantly. Beets, artichokes, radishes, greens, apples, and celery are all the bile movers. So, if you have an issue where if you eat some greasy fried food, you don't feel so good, feel a little nauseous or queasy, or you get pain on the right side of your rib cage over here a little bit sometimes, then you probably have a little bit of a congestive issue. You have constipation, you don't go to the bathroom well, then that lack of elimination that's effortless and efficient, at least one good complete bowel movement first thing in the morning, that's not happening to you naturally, you're probably reabsorbing a lot of the bile, 94% for the average American, back to your liver, and in time, the liver will become congested, the bile will become thick, and your digestive fire will turn off or down, and you'll begin to start seeing yourself being unable to digest, hard to digest stuff that you were able to once digest like an 18-year-old. Everything was great, you could eat anything, your stomach, you had no issues whatsoever. How many of you remember when you were younger, you could eat anything? And now it's like, it's not so easy anymore. If I eat the wrong thing, I bloat, I gain weight, I don't feel so good. This can change by simply understanding how to heal the gut. How do we do it? Look at nature. Nature said, in the wintertime, we're going to slime up your intestinal tract. One of my favorite drinks for that is to take slippery elm, marshmallow root, and licorice root. Take those herbs chopped, a tablespoon of each in 2 quarts of water, soak it overnight. In the morning, this is all on my website. If you want, and you soak it down in the morning to a half a quart. You soak it overnight, boil it down to a half a quart, from 2 quarts to a half a quart. Strain it through a metal strainer, and then you take tablespoon dosage every couple of hours throughout the day for a month. You ever saw that Pepto-Bismol commercial in the States where it just coats the whole intestinal tract? One of the absolute best things you can do to heal your intestinal tract by healing your intestinal wall. Then, after you slime up your intestinal tract, you can begin to start drinking teas, natural root teas, dandelion root, burdock root, or these herbs you can take in the whole herb form, not the extract form. They're too concentrated and too harsh for the intestinal wall. And you can protect your intestinal wall. Khichdi, one of the most amazing foods for your intestinal tract. In ancient India, they would take the rice and they would take the husk off by hand. They would take the little mung beans and cut them and split them by hand. So the husks of the rice and the bean would fall off. So it would become baby food and food for medicine. And they would cook it together into a soup and it would heal the intestinal tract. They would cook it with ghee or feed people who were sick and had intestinal problems with ghee. We know that your intestinal tract literally has a microbe in it, a handful of microbes, one of which is called Clostridium butyricum, whose job in life in your intestinal tract is to literally make ghee in your own gut. The skin of your intestinal tract, like we talked about last night, may be the most important skin of all. And your intestinal tract makes its own ghee. It loves it so much. The ghee, the butyric acid, which is what ghee is mostly made of, is the #1 driver of immunity in your intestinal tract. It's the #1 driver of the energy for the cells of your intestinal tract, and it feeds the other microbes in your intestinal tract. Again, when we talk about ancient wisdom proving modern science, it's like, how did they know thousands of years ago that taking ghee would actually heal the intestinal wall, energize it, provide immunity for it, and feed the other microbes to create a diverse microbiology that we desperately need? Interesting, huh? So ghee, khichdi, slippery elm, marshmallow root, licorice root, tea, your root vegetables, your leafy greens, your bile movers, beets, are so good because they also are lymph movers because they make your skin red and they dye you. Berries and cherries are all your lymph movers, and that is one way to start the process of becoming better digesters. That make sense? So quickly here, I'll go through this. What happens is this is where you can see the purple, where the bile and the pancreatic enzymes and the stomach acid all go into what's called the common bile duct. They all go there. Problem is that when the bile becomes thick, the stomach acids are neutralized by the bile and the enzymes. That's what we talked about. And then a whole bunch of stuff happens. When the bile becomes thick, none of the enzymes can't flow, the bile can't flow, and eventually your stomach acid will turn off, like we said. And that becomes a problem. You get thick bile, trouble digesting fats, stomach acid not neutralized, acid production reduced, digestion becomes weak, and gluten and dairy intolerance. So what do we do about that? One of the things to do is to definitely be thinking about ways to strengthen your bile flow. Beets and leafy greens, and starting to connect with the seeds, starting to eat more of the foods that are in season. Those are the medicines of nature. It's not really that difficult. And here's the little bit of a problem, is that if you start eating more fats on top of a diet that's already loaded with too much sugar and carbohydrates, you're just going to give the body too much fuel, basically. And any extra fuel you give it, whether it's fat or sugar or carbs or starch, is going to turn into fat. So we don't want to do that. So what we have to do is we have to take away, number one, the bad fats first. Any fat that's been cooked, only ones that are really cooked are ones that have a high flash points, generally speaking. That's ghee, coconut oil, butter. Best news all day is butter can be cooked and you can eat it. It's fine. But all the oils that are like the canola oil and the sunflower seed oil, the stuff that you see in the supermarket shelves with clear bottles, that they are completely deodorized, bleached, boiled, purified, so there's really nothing in them that can go rancid any longer, and they're completely indigestible. So what you want to do to stop congesting your liver and your gallbladders, you want to stop eating the purified processed fats, which are in most of the fast foods and packaged foods that we eat. You have to, not just trans fats, but anything that has oil in it, even a whole fruits cracker. You have to be careful because it's got cooked safflower oil in it. That's organic, but it's still cooked oil. So be careful. If you want to purify your liver, you got to stop eating those oils. So that's one thing. And then, of course, get rid of the sugars in your diet, the processed sugars. Those are very, very important, as I'm sure you probably know. And then once you start doing that, you can begin to do things to strengthen your digestion. What's sort of interesting in this one, if you take 1 to 2 glasses of water 15 to 20 minutes before the meal, you hydrate the stomach, which will produce more acid. Did you realize that your stomach is buffered around the stomach? There's a buffer layer around your stomach, which is 80% water. Most folks don't drink. About 2/3 of the American population are dehydrated. They don't get enough water. So when you eat a bunch of food, the stomach has to produce acid in the stomach. But that acid will only produce if it knows there's a buffer around the stomach that buffers the acid to neutralize the acid. If you drink a big glass of water a half an hour before the meal, that water hydrates through the stomach lining, fills that buffer layer so it can really neutralize as much acid as your stomach can make. So one of the best ways to turn on your digestive fire is to drink a big glass of water 15 to 30 minutes before the meal. Not with the meal, not during the meal, 15 to 30 minutes before the meal. If you drink it with the meal, you'll dilute all that acid. But before the meal, it'll prehydrate your stomach. And studies show that when you actually do that, people's basal metabolic index goes down, they lose weight, and their blood sugar becomes more stable, according to one study, by just drinking a glass of water a half an hour before the meal. So this is an Ayurvedic technique. People think, don't drink water with your meal. It didn't say drink water with the meal. It's drink water before the meal and stay properly hydrated. and that will turn your stomach fire back on. Super simple way. Kids, really important for kids because a lot of kids don't drink enough water. They come in to sit down from dinner, they're running outside, whatever, and they get a stomach ache as soon as they start eating sometimes. If you make sure you give them a big glass of water while you're cooking the meal 15, 30 minutes before, here, drink a big glass of water, then you hydrate them and they have a better shot at digesting their food. Another technique, salad dressing made with vinegar and olive oil, and oil or lemon juice. The lemon juice and vinegar are acids, and they actually naturally stimulate the acid production in your intestinal, in your stomach. And the oil increases the bile flow. So the old-fashioned salad dressing of having olive oil and vinegar was actually not a bad idea. Okay, lemon would be my preference, but in a pinch, that's actually a really good idea to keep your digestion strong. Green tea with your meals actually helps the body burn fat and aid digestion. It's a powerful antioxidant. Most traditional cultures will drink a small cup of green tea to sip their green tea with their food. They don't necessarily have it on an empty stomach. They have it with their meal. Not a huge amount of liquid, but just enough to actually provide and aid the digestive strength. Pretty simple. Spices like peppers, like ginger, turmeric, cayenne, all of these help with the ability for the stomach to produce acid. They help the absorption of sugars in the body, and they're significantly important. We talked about in the class the other day, when you take turmeric, 16 parts turmeric to 1 part black pepper, you increase the absorption of the turmeric by 2,000%. This is how Ayurveda is so beautiful, by understanding how you can actually take natural herbs and spices and put them together and combine them in a way where they become more potent than even the most powerful extracts. That study with turmeric and black pepper, 16 to 1, outperformed the chemotherapy drugs for colon cancer and matched the chemotherapy drugs for breast, bone, and prostate cancer. Just crazy how we just begin to learn how these natural things just combined properly can be extremely, extremely effective. Turmeric is, they think, responsible for why in India they have very little of many of these cancers. Beets and greens, eat a half a beet a day, and leafy greens to move the bile and boost digestive fire. If you have any issues with pain on the right side or not pooping as regularly as you could or extra weight around your belly, start adding beets to your diet. If you add beets to get the bile to move and you start doing some of these digestive fire techniques, you're going to start to rekindle your digestive fire, you know? Ginger pizza is a great way to strengthen your digestive fire. What you do is you take a ginger root, you slice it into dime-sized pieces, put it on a plate, sprinkle some lemon and some salt on it, and eat 2 or 3 of those before each meal. A fantastic, tasty way to fire up your digestion before a meal. Very, very easy, and something you can have in your refrigerator. It can last, probably 4 or 5 days in the fridge without any problem at all. This is one of my favorite techniques. If you go to any restaurant on the planet, every restaurant has salt and pepper on the table, right? Salt increases digestive fire. Pepper increases digestive fire. So all you do is you ask for a glass of water with no ice, put a little salt and pepper in your water and drink it down. 30, 15 minutes later, the food comes and you've got yourself a digestive fire, reset. If you want to get fancy, ask for a cup of hot water with a little lemon, put a little bit of salt and pepper on it, and sip that. And before your food comes, and now you have this little very simple way of stoking your digestive fire before a meal. It's a great technique if you find yourself out to dinner and it's late and you know that the digestion is not so good at nighttime. We have circadian rhythms that turn the digestive off at night and on during the day. And many of us find ourselves eating when the clock turned it off. And so this is one way to help turn the fire back on the very best you can. I think pretty cool. The other thing is relaxing when we eat our food. Don't eat standing up. There's an old saying, if you eat standing up, death looks over your shoulder. We know that when we eat on the run, the nervous system that actually digests the food is turned off. The calm fight or flight nervous system, or the calm parasympathetic, it's called the rest and digest nervous system, is activated when you sit still and you're calm. When you eat on the run, you gobble down your food, you activate the fight or flight nervous system, which literally turns off your digestive fire. If you're watching a scary movie or the news or eating on the run or in your car, you're literally turning off your digestive fire. Literally 100%, that nervous system predominates, and the one that actually allows you to digest your food literally gets turned off. I mean, it's such a powerful thing. You have two nervous systems that are automated in your system. One is the rest and digest, and one is the fight or flight. So if you want to eat, you want to make sure the rest and digest nervous system is actually turned on, which means sitting down, relaxing, taking time to eat your food. Remember one time I was in India and we ate this huge meal. And I was at a conference with my teacher, and it was hot, and it was like this steamy room. It was sort of a room maybe this size. And I ate this huge meal with my teacher, and I said, I'm really feeling sleepy. I think I overate. I think I'm going to go to my room and lie down, and you can go to the hall together because they're speaking nothing but Hindi, and I don't want to fall asleep, and I don't want to embarrass you. I'm the only white guy here. I think I'll just go to sleep. And he said, no. You go to your room, lie down on your left side for 5 or 10 minutes, and you'll be fine. And I'll come knock on the door, and we'll come to the hall together. I said, you knock on the door, I'll probably be asleep. I probably won't answer, and I'll see you later for dinner tonight. He comes to my door 10 minutes later, knocks on my door, and I'm awake. And he said to me, go in your room and take a rest, but he said, lie on your left side, and I'll come get you in a few minutes. So I go to the hall with him. I sit down in this hall. Everybody else in the room was sound asleep except for me. Because people were lecturing, going on and on and on. And in Hindi, I didn't understand a word of it, but I was wide awake. After the lecture, I went up to my teacher. I said, how did that happen? I wanted to go to sleep. I was feeling so heavy from that meal. And he says, we did overeat. Because the food was well prepared. It was cooked in a sattvic manner. He was very clear to say that. Because it was cooked, it had good vibrations, it had good microbes, you could say. Because then you overate and you lie it on your left side. We know the stomach sits like this. And the stomach sits like this and you lie, the stomach sort of cradles the food. And allows when you lie down and take a rest, allows your stomach to just release the food very, very simply and very effortlessly. If you lie on the right side, the food is pushed out prematurely. If you lie on your left side, it allows the food to digest in a more balanced way. So he said, because you lied on your left side, you actually digested a very big, heavy meal better, and it was cooked well, so therefore you digested it well. Most people eat their food, gobble, 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 and they go, eat on the run, and they have indigestion, and they fall asleep, so they decide not to eat a big meal in the middle of the day, because if I eat a big meal in the middle of the day, I fall asleep in the afternoon, so therefore I eat a little tiny something. And when you eat a little tiny something in the middle of the day, then you go into the afternoon. And in Ayurveda, we know that the nervous system is active in the afternoon. The brain goes, where's my fuel? I need 80% of the sugar at 3 in the afternoon. And all you had was a salad in front of your computer for lunch, right? And the brain goes, where's my fuel? And the blood sugar starts to crash. And you start to pull down the menu and start craving dark chocolate or thinking about Starbucks or passing M&Ms around the office. Did that ever happen to anybody? At 3 o'clock, you feel a little low and you head on the path to Starbucks. That ever happen? That's because the brain wants to be fed. But it was supposed to be fed in the middle of the day with a very large meal in a relaxed way so you can deliver food at 3, 4, 5, and 6 in the afternoon. But if you don't deliver it, you're going to crash and burn and crave. And off you go. Roller coaster ride starts to going up and down, okay? When we do this, we end up getting this thing called upward moving vata. All the stress pushes the stomach up under the stomach. And there's a technique that I wrote about called stomach pulling, where you can literally pull your stomach back down. And I thought it'd be fun to teach you this as we wrap up this lecture. I know it's late for a lot of you guys and have a big test tomorrow. I don't know if you know this thing. It's called a hiatal hernia. it's a situation where the stomach gets pushed up so strongly against the diaphragm, which is a big muscle under your rib cage, it literally pops through the diaphragm. Your stomach literally herniates through the diaphragm. It's a very common condition. Years before it pops through, there's so much pressure of the stomach pushing up on the diaphragm, happens after pregnancy for women, that it actually can stick your stomach to the underside of the diaphragm and literally stick your liver to the underside of the diaphragm. So now we have these liver and your stomach stuck to the diaphragm. You can't breathe deeply. You can't breathe into the calm nerves. You're forced to breathe like a rabbit, 26,000 breaths per day, triggering a life-threatening emergency response with every breath you take because you literally you don't have access down here any longer. And that just makes the digestion is stuck to the diaphragm. Your stomach is stuck. It can't digest your food. So if you have stomach problems or digestive problems, as many of you said you did when we started this lecture, one of the most important things that I've discovered is to free the stomach from the diaphragm. So all you do is you take your hand, your left hand like this, and stick it underneath your rib cage. Take your other hand like this and poke it, just like this. And just poke underneath your rib cage a little bit and see if you feel anywhere where it's a little tender. If you feel a tender spot, take your other thumb and just put some downward pressure on that spot. Really simple. Just put a little downward pressure on that little tender spot. You can go on the right side too, because the right side is where your liver is, and there's lots of congestion in your liver and bile ducts. And if you feel a little tenderness or hardness area or tension there, put a little downward pressure, and all you do then simply is breathe in and arch your back. Just breathe in and arch back as you're pushing down with downward pressure. Come back, relax, stick it in there again, breathe in, and push down. You're doing like a little sun salutation, but you're helping the diaphragm pull it down, separating your stomach from the diaphragm. You can go both sides, just kind of breathing in, arch yourself back, breathing in. Anybody feel any soreness or tension there? So if you feel some soreness and tension there, you probably have what are called adhesions underneath the stomach pushing up against the diaphragm. This is an extremely common thing in Ayurveda. It's called udvarta, upward moving vata. Almost everybody has some version of this. So one of the most important things you can do to keep your digestion strong is to make sure that underneath your rib cage, where your stomach, diaphragm, pancreas, liver all meet, those are the three guys that have to be coordinated, there are no adhesions and upward pressure there. If you can get the bile to begin to flow, the bile flow will allow the energy to go down again. But if it's all congested here, everything just keeps moving up. Literally, the stomach has a block and says, I can't let everything leave because there's no bile and there's no pancreatic enzymes. So everything stays in your stomach and pushes up and creates this problem. It's just such a simple thing, but I can't even tell you how many miracles I've seen in my practice with folks doing this at home. I've got a video on it. It's called Stomach Pulling on my website if you want to learn more about it. But if you have patients or moms or dads who have stomach issues, this is because you can take an herb and you can do the things that I mentioned here, but the reality is if there's structural adhesions, the herbs aren't going to work. Stomach pulling. Very simple. You're pulling your stomach back down. And then let's wrap this up. There's 10 of these things. No cold drinks. We all know that will put out your digestive fire when you eat your food, so don't do that. That's a big no-no. And then, of course, eating late at night is also, we know that our circadian clocks tell us that if we eat late at night, we don't digest our food very well at all. And, when we think about, how does all this affect our emotion? Well, eating and having efficient digestion allows you to deliver sattva into your physiology. And if you don't deliver sattva into your small and large intestine, you're not going to produce the microbes that are going to support optimal health, possibly support ojas production, immunity, radiance, glow, and optimal health. So eating in a relaxed way, eating wholesome food, non-processed food, and making sure that you reset your digestion regularly to keep it strong is like, I know this was sort of a boring lecture because it was like a lot of detail-y stuff, but it's maybe the most important one that I could give, because if you follow these rules, you'll never have digestive weaknesses. And I promise you, as you get older, the thing that I see day in, day out in my practice is people suffering from digestive imbalances. Their arthritis caused from their digestion, cancers caused from their digestion, chronic fatigue, candida, all the things that I see are really first and foremost treated and addressed by looking at your digestion. So I think maybe this is the first step in becoming experts in understanding your own digestive system, where your strengths and weaknesses are, and how to, be, responsible and know how to take care of your own digestive strength and your own, individual microbiology. And a big part of that, of course, is tying yourself back to the cycles of nature, eating at the right time, going to bed at the right time, eating in the right season, and beginning to get the microbiology shift that really is what allows us to thrive. Okay, it's been great being here this trip. Thank you all very, very much. It's been really a joy. Thank you.